So here recently, I've been going through the various classes for the Crimson Tide, picking out the individuals I think are set for a big year. And today we need to talk about the seniors. And this list right here is a little bit harder to pin down because of the very nature of the information we're talking about, giving the true seniors and those that came back for their extended senior season due to COVID. But we need to hop straight into this. And before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Do you believe the individuals such as Brian Robinson, Cameron Latu, and Chris Allen could all be poised for massive seasons in 2021, and let me know who else you're looking for. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content, and you don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoy that content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions are massive to content creators such as myself. But with all of that being said, we need to hop right into this because just as I said in the intro, given the very nature of the information we're talking about, it's a little bit harder to pin down because you have individuals who are either seniors or coming back for an opportunity to increase their draft stock. So there's a lot of guys we need to keep an eye on that are going to be looking to prove a lot. So with that in mind, on the offensive side, I want to kick it off with honorable mentions, and I have four. Four guys who easily could make this list. If you have them in this list, you're going to find no disagreement from me. But guys, because of both the position battles and the depth in the rooms they're in, it's just kind of really hard to tell how their seasons are going to play out. And first and foremost, along the offensive line, I have two, Kendall Randolph and Tommy Brown. Now, these are two individuals, both Kendall Randolph and Tommy Brown. Nobody would be surprised if either one of these guys is in the starting lineup week one. They're both incredibly talented individuals, guys who we should be looking forward to seeing how they continue to progress through fall camp. It's just right now, the Crimson Tide offensive line having to replace two starters, really three, but being in a situation where they only really have to replace two. There's so much talent in that room, and there's still so much of a competition left to be had that it's very hard to pin down who could be in for a big year, but we're absolutely going to revisit the offensive line throughout fall camp because that's going to be much more telling. So this is one we're going to revisit. My next two are wide receivers, both Slade Bolden and Xavier Williams. Both guys I think are very talented, but that room for both Slade and Xavier Williams, it's not going to be an easy path to lock down playing time, especially at that slot receiver position, and especially with the addition of JoJo Earl and Christian Leary. It's going to be very hard to lock down that spot, which is why both of those guys get honorable mentions, because I can see them getting reps, being successful. I just don't know how much. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays up. But with all that being said, that really kicks us in to the real list we need to get talking about. And to start this off on the offensive side, I have two offensive linemen, Emil Ekiyor and Chris Owens. And the thing that makes these two so important, and especially Ekiyor was there for the entirety of last season as a starter. He is a really important piece for the Alabama Crimson Tide to look to, and a leader that should really help this team in this upcoming season. The Crimson Tide are very lucky that even though they lose a first rounder and another guy that should have been a first rounder in Landon Dickerson, that they can replace the offensive line with other talented pieces, but that they retain individuals such as Neal, such as Ekiyor, because these are guys that you really like to hang your hat on along that offensive line, especially when you have a new quarterback. So that right there is really big for the Crimson Tide. He should be a really important piece for this offensive line, a piece that Crimson Tide fans are very glad to have back, but he's not alone because the Crimson Tide find themselves in a precarious situation along the offensive front. Landon Dickerson gets injured, and in comes Chris Owens in the most vital part of Alabama's season last year, and he played really, really well. His experience is going to be paramount to the Crimson Tide this year, and he's the reason I always say you really only have to replace two starters. Landon Dickerson was a starter, and it's going to be very hard to do what he did, but Chris Owens is an individual who has experience and has the best experience you could want, and because of that, I think Tide fans are really looking at the offensive line, feeling at ease with both the center position and Ekiyor. The question is those other two positions. Now, moving past the two offensive linemen, my next guy I want to talk about on offense is Cameron Latu. Cameron Latu coming to the Crimson Tide as a defensive guy and transitioning to the tight end position. And he's an individual that through various articles throughout the years, we've heard high praise of, but we finally got to see it in the spring game. And there was a lot to be impressed about. Going back and rewatching the spring game, you notice the fluidity he has in routes, and he is a sneaky good blocker. And that right there is one of the things that actually really impressed me, because if he can continue to hone down his blocking skills the Crimson Tide can have a really intriguing mismatch because of the same thing I always talked about with Najee Harris, the fluidity he offered this Alabama offense to where they didn't have to sub out a whole lot. They could use the same package to run multiple different formations and schemes because Najee could do anything. I form, out the shotgun, put him at slot receiver. It didn't matter. That's how deep his talent was. If you can get Cameron Latu to block, you can really make some mismatched schemes, especially paired with Jaleel Billingsley, where now the defense can't only look at Latu as just a blocking tight end. That could just be a threat, which is going to keep them unbelievably off balance. Now you couple that with a quarterback that is as twitchy as Bryce Young with the running backs you have, and you can see where this could be a recipe for disaster. The cherry on top of all of it is Bill O'Brien's use of the tight end position, which I outlined a few videos ago. If you haven't seen that, go back and check it out, and now you can understand why I'm even more excited about Cameron Latu. Even absent Bill O'Brien, I would be excited about Cameron Latu, but Bill O'Brien's use of the tight end position, I think, is going to be shown this year, and what a tight end tandem to have to show it off in Latu and Billingsley. But Latu is sneaky athletic, sneaky fast, really good hands, and I think he's in for a big season. Now, my last offensive guy should come as no surprise, and that is Brian Robinson Jr., who finally gets his chance. And this is somebody who pundits across college football have pointed to as an individual that could be a top-tier player this year, and I absolutely think he has the talent to go out there and do so. Brian Robinson has not had the opportunities, but that's through no fault of his own. I know some people will ask, well, if he's that talented, why didn't he get the opportunities? Because he had all-time talented guys in front of him. Just look at the NFL running backs represented that are Crimson Tide members that he played alongside, and then you have Najee Harris, who is a bit of a unicorn in how talented and what he could do on a football field. Brian Robinson is an individual who could also massively increase the money he earns in the NFL, given how he plays this season. Now, it might be a little bit more of a running back by committee, but what a guy to head the committee in Brian Robinson Jr., a top 300 prospect coming out of high school. Now he finally gets his opportunity. But this goes over to the defensive side of the ball. And the first two individuals I had for defense, I've ping-ponged all day between whether I want to put them in honorable mention or straight up on the list. And for the time being, I think they're going to remain just straight up on the list, and that is the tandem of LaBryan Ray and Fedarian Mathis. And let me explain. Looking at LaBryan Ray, this is an individual who ranked as the 28th player overall, coming out of high school in his class, a 5-star guy, but a guy who has had the injury bug be an unfortunate part of his time in college. And this is a season that if he can put together a healthy season, he could have a meteoric rise of draft boards. Now, I don't know that he will ever ultimately be taken to where his talent level is because of his injury history, but nonetheless, he can put himself in really good draft position with a good year for the Crimson Tide, and that's exactly what he looks to go out there and do. He has got a lot to prove. He is head-spinningly talented. This is an individual who I always say with the Crimson Tide when I talked about some of the earlier guys, if you give them an inch of opportunity, they'll take 2 miles worth of production. That is the guy LaBryan Ray is. When you give him a little bit of opportunity, he's going to take a lot of production and show everybody why he was so highly touted and why he's so highly regarded amongst the coaching staff. But then my next few guys is another tandem, Jalen Armour-Davis and Josh Jobe. Now, these two are a tandem, but for entirely different reasons. Josh Jobe being the established name in the secondary, looking to take over for Patrick Surtain. But Jalen Armour-Davis is in this list for the opposite reason. We've heard talk from the coaching staff and how talented this individual is, but he hasn't been able to go out there and show it because of injury. Now, the interesting thing about these two that I find kind of interesting is coming out of high school, Armour-Davis ranked as the 13th best corner in the nation, and Jobe is the 14th best corner in the nation. So intrinsically, their whole careers have kind of been intertwined in that regard, being so closely rated to each other, and now they get to play in the same backfield. But the interesting thing is how many young guys they're going to have breathing down their necks. Kool-Aid McKinstry was unbelievable in the spring game in his technique, in his poise, just really, really advanced stuff. Terrion Arnold is a guy that we have heard rave reviews about, and Kyrie Jackson is also a guy that has come in with rave reviews as well, so they're going to have a hard time keeping those guys off their back, but that's why that position is going to be so interesting to watch, because that's only going to make everybody better. Looking behind you and seeing the number one corner in the nation that just got there, then you watch his spring game and he is absolutely about it. He is deserving of the number one corner. That's only going to make you better. So it's good that that competition is there, but it's going to be one we have to watch. My final two names, First and foremost, Jalen Moody. And Jalen Moody is an individual who I guess in all technicality, by the metrics in which I have done these lists before, could have been on the honorable mention list because there's no guarantee that he's even the starting linebacker with the addition of Henry To'oTo'o. However, I do find it very hard to believe that he's not utilized in at least some capacity this year. If we look at the Arkansas game last year, he was really impressive, and he was very impressive in A-Day. Moody is somebody I absolutely had to put on this list because he is absolutely the definition of give him an inch of opportunity. He's going to take 2 miles of production. I have no doubt about it. But the last name on this list is Chris Allen. And that might not be a surprise to many of you. Chris Allen is an individual who up to this point and up to last season in 2020 had half a sack throughout his entire career at Alabama. Last year he finishes the year with 5 sacks. So last year was the best football Chris Allen has played. And specifically down the stretch as the year went on, Allen kept getting better and better and really coming into his own. And that's going to be very interesting to watch carry over into this year because he is an individual that because he had a 5-sack season this year, if he can back that up with a 7 to 8 sack season next year, I mean, we're talking a massive rise in draft stock compared to where he could have been if he would have entered the NFL draft this past draft. But even if he just backs it up with another 5-sack season, I still believe his draft stock will rise. Why? Because he was able to consistently back up a production, which he hasn't been able to do before. No fault of his own, because Alabama had guys in front of him. He bided his time. It's his opportunity. But seeing him go replicate a successful season in 2020 with another one in 2021, even if it only matches the numbers he did this year, will be a positive for his draft stock. It will show it's not just a one-off. This is the guy you're getting, which we all know that as Tide fans, but that's what the NFL is looking for. But I believe he's going to have more sacks this year. Very interested to see what y'all are thinking. Hop down in the comments, let me know which individuals you're looking for, and let me know where you agree with or disagree with this list. That's it. See ya.